Hey guys, it's Jeff here with True Crime Myths, Legends, and More podcast. And today we are going to be talking some stuff right from my wheelhouse. I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice in Kentucky for 8 years, and then worked in a jail for as a corrections officer for some time. So you guys know that I have a background in that. And so today we have a special guest on with us, Rosario Chico. She is coming from Oklahoma, and you know is going to tell us about some of the stuff that has been going on within the family services and things like that, and really all over the country. And so it is kind of very timely, and something that is near and dear to my heart to talk about, because there is just so much stuff out there that is going on, and makes it really, really difficult. So without further ado, I am going to bring her on. I also want to mention you should check out uh, justiceforrosario.com and check out all the things that she has on there. I was actually looking at that a little bit ago um, to go over that. And Rosario works for the Department of Human Services there in Oklahoma, and all of the things that she is currently going through are chronicled there on the website. And you should definitely check it out and support any way you can. So let me bring on Rosario. Hello, hello. How's it going?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Just hanging in there, like, or any parent that's stuck in the system.
Yeah, it is. It's unbelievable. Like I mentioned, I worked for the Department of Juvenile Justice in Kentucky, and I got to see a lot of that stuff firsthand. Uh, you know, from things that were that happened that were very good, and things that were not so good. My cousin also works in human services in Delaware, and so he is working firsthand with some of that and dealing with a lot of different cases. So without me talking too much, because you know I want you to be able to talk about what's going on with you. So tell us a bit about that.
So I'm a television producer. True crime television mainly is my niche. I've done some reality TV shows like 600-Pound Life, Married at First Sight, so on, TLC shows, but mainly true crime. And so that's why I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I worked there on the first 48 for a few years, and then on a homicide cold case show. And I was in a domestic violence relationship for a long time. And so whenever I started working and I became a TV producer, I became just more independent. Like, I felt that I could maybe more safely leave the relationship. And I still haven't, in a sense, been able to leave because I'm stuck in limbo in the court system. The first 48 producer, the creator, had hired me to do a sizzle reel at Mabel Bassett, which was the Oklahoma women's prison, and they had a RICE program, which is great for women, teaches them cosmetology, gets them a degree so that whenever they get out, they have a trade to be able to do, and just a fantastic program. And so I was there to film that program, but I ran into this woman named Tony Hall, and I spoke to her a little bit. She was a domestic violence victim, and she had been convicted and sentenced to about 33 years in prison. And it was her graduation that day, and there were decorations, there were cake, there was a cake, there were graduation decorations, families could actually get to be there for that day. And it was probably the most dignified setting that her and her children had been in since she was incarcerated. And I was filming, I was behind the camera, shooter producer. Usually most true crime, you're usually a shooter producer because you want to keep your footprint low. And I saw her and her children. Now, she got convicted basically for failure to protect, while her significant other got about 1 year in jail, slap on the wrist, and he was the actual abuser. It's my understanding she wasn't even at home when it happened. She was at work. And so in the state of Oklahoma really kind of sadly has maybe a bias against women, where we highly criminalize women of color, women who are previous domestic violence victims, sexual abuse victims. We have one of the highest incarceration rates in the US, therefore the world. And so for whatever reason, the state of Oklahoma, I will just say it, loves to criminalize women. And so she was there. And, the image that I saw, that I captured, was her crying, her children now taller than her, towering over her, hugging her, crying. They're crying. She's crying. I'm behind the camera crying. And all I can think is, my God, this is the story that needs to be told. Not what I'm here to cover, although such a great program. It's what I'm witnessing right now that needs to be told. And she was my example of what happens when you don't report domestic violence. And that I didn't want to be that. So about a week later, there was a domestic violence incident in my home. And I think had I not, I don't know, right? But I think had I not met her and seen her pain and the pain of her children, I don't know that I would have ever picked up the phone and called law enforcement when that incident happened. But what happened is, it's a catch-22 in Oklahoma. I wasn't protected. My children weren't protected, yet I did what I was supposed to do. And I didn't want to be Tony Hall. I didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for my children. And now I'm battling a court system that is really never ending. And at the time, I had money. I was a TV producer. And so it really is a system that benefits the attorneys, the judges, and there are no winners no matter what after that, right? Even the person that might gain favor from the court system, they're still drained financially in many ways. And so it's been an ongoing battle. I think, my divorce has been pending for 7 years. There's been no finalization. It's been just a system that does not work, and it does not work for victims too often. It doesn't work to protect children too often. Sadly, it matters what attorney you walk in with. And, if you have the more connected attorney, then the case is going to go your way, especially whenever there's a lot of concerns of abuse, whenever there's concerns of domestic violence, right? If you have someone on the other side that has more resources, that's how the case will go. And sadly, that's, for a long time, I thought it was just me and I felt very alone. And then I started researching and saw that it's a national pandemic and even a worldwide pandemic. It's court systems that are determined by who you know and what resources you have behind you. And everybody kind of knows, there's always those jokes, about attorneys and having licenses to steal and so on, and that whoever has a good attorney, or you better get a good attorney. So overall, I think the public understands, but I think until you're in it, you don't truly understand the depth of how difficult it is to truly pursue any sort of justice. And justice truly is the exception in a lot of these court systems.
Yeah, it is. It is unbelievable. And I mean, we've watched that with, so many of these current cases that are going on now, even the very, very high profile cases where, it's all how much money, how much influence you have to really determine the outcome of these cases. It doesn't matter, the victims and the people that are affected. And it's just so unbelievable that that could continue to be happening all around us all the time. And I think it's really scary that, none of us are exempt from that.
Mhm.
It can, one phone call, one moment of time can really change everything. And so, I watched a lot of that when I worked, because I worked for several children's homes. Well, I worked for one children's home, and then I worked for the state uh, doing we had a pilot program where we were reintroducing youth to the community after they were in youth development centers, basically in youth jails, and we were trying to get them back, and working with therapy within their families, and then going out and being able to get jobs and go back to school and do all of that. But it was really, really difficult. Some of the families that we worked with, not only did they really need a lot of mental health services that were just not there to be provided for any of them, but there is very little support in helping to get through those situations. And even though we were doing the best that we could, uh, it's impossible to fight against that. There's just so much out there that is uh, that doesn't work in the victim's favor. It's just it's so difficult because everything is so incredibly entrenched. It's been hundreds of years of the same kind of system that that is focused on you know just like the you mentioned all the jokes, the license to steal and all that is very focused on that, and not focused on actually helping the people. And I know lots of attorneys and lots of good people that are trying to do good work, but they are fighting against this entire system that is not helping and in its favor. So I the work that you're doing and putting out there and exposing a lot of this stuff is it is so difficult because it is everything is against you to even get that out. And so uh, I'm glad that there are forums that that we can talk about this and we can discuss that and get some of that out, so people start to really understand before it happens to them, before they get into a situation where there's no easy way out of. Uh, so yeah, um,
Yeah, and I'll say, I currently work for DHS, the Oklahoma Department of Human Services, and I always give the disclaimer that whenever I speak, whenever there's a news coverage or I do a Facebook Live or I'm at a public event, a rally, or even a podcast, I always give the disclaimer of I'm not here as a representative of the department, but I'm here as a mother whose children have been failed by the system. And I've been witness to many other families failed by the system, and many families that have found me after I went public with my case. I mean, and we're talking hundreds of cases, not just in Oklahoma, but statewide. And I went to go work for the department. I was in a abusive relationship, and that abuse just continues even throughout the divorce, throughout emails, throughout. And, for a while, what I kept hearing from my spouse that I was divorcing and the guardian ad litem was that I cared more about my career as a TV producer than my children. And I heard that repeatedly, whenever my children were failed horrifically by Child Protective Services in Oklahoma. I really didn't want to be the mother that would say or thought my children were failed by CPS, DHS. I really wanted to know by experience, by training, that by the policy that, yes, my children were failed by DHS, by CPS. And, I've been very open about that. But I knew at the very beginning when things just didn't feel right, and a lot of the times victims are cornered and to make this deal, and if you go in front of the judge it might be worse, and the deals were just so horrific that I got to the point where I told my attorney at the time, like, I need to go in front of the judge because this isn't worse than a judge would do. And so there's just a lot of intimidation, especially whenever you've experienced domestic violence. But in general, whenever you're new to the system and you have no clue what's going on, by the time you catch up, there's a lot of damage that happens to your case, to your family, to your children, to yourself. And so I knew from the very beginning, just things just didn't feel right when I felt that my children weren't being protected as they should have from the very beginning. And I knew that bias was going to be very difficult to prove. And I felt like I was on a mission to try to find a pattern, and that only a pattern would demonstrate what some of these court professionals are doing in these cases. And I did speak to a criminal law attorney who told me, where to get on to research OSCN.net, to research all opposing counsel, their cases, who they work with. And so this attorney put me on the track because he had been harmed by the same attorney that in my children's case, she's the guardian ad litem still. And in his case, she was the guardian for his dad. And he ended up filing to remove her, filed a lawsuit. He didn't pursue the lawsuit. But I got this information from him, and right away I started finding cases where we had the same opposing counsel and it was the same guardian ad litem. And every single time that guardian ad litem was recommending sole custody to the clients of the exact same opposing counsel. And it didn't matter what the evidence was. That's what she did. Even in a case where a father wasn't seeking out sole custody, though there was domestic violence in that case, she still recommended sole custody. And it was a case where he had a lot of money. The wife was, still is, a kindergarten teacher, sweetest Christian woman that I've really ever met. And their child has delays, mental delays, and has a disability. And, her mindset maybe is more of like a 5-year-old, even though she was maybe 12 around the time. And the father just left handprints all over her. And the neighbors got involved. The neighbors called Child Protective Services. And the mother, being a domestic violence victim, she didn't want to speak up. And from the mother, I learned that DHS, Child Protective Services, told her if she doesn't speak up, they will criminally charge her. And then she spoke up, and then guess what happened? They unsubstantiated the abuse. Now her abuser knows that she spoke up against him, and they recommended like anger management classes, something that he never has done, never had to do. And the only reason why this woman didn't lose her children, I think, is, two variables. Her children were older and could speak up to themselves and stood up to the guardian ad litem, or speak up for themselves. And also, they had a different judge. And the 3 other cases, including mine that I found, we had the same opposing counsel, same guardian ad litem, same judge. We all lost our children. For me, I knew that physical abuse had happened. I didn't know the full extent. But there was a domestic violence criminal case against my ex, and the district attorney contacted DHS at the time. And I told them, do not contact DHS. It's not going to help me. There's a guardian ad litem that's very just pro the father, an advocate for the father instead of her job, which is the best interest of the children. And I just felt like I was going to lose my children if that did happen, because this guardian ad litem had told me, don't call police, don't call Child Protective Services, don't take your kids to the doctor. And so I just didn't think it was going to help in any way whenever she was going to be always a witness and advocating for the father. And in that investigation that bypassed the guardian ad litem, she was helping filter Child Protective Service reports. I think the sheriff's department did a referral before, a doctor did a referral before, and they were just screening them out. And the guardian ad litem was screening them out with the CPS worker, because the CPS worker didn't want to go out and investigate, right? If it was a call that came in on a Friday at 3 p.m., she wants to go home, right? And that's the sad reality of many of these workers. And they screen out a lot of cases where they should be going and seeing children, especially if there's bruises that are reported. And so because I think because the DA called it in, it bypassed all these screen outs that the guardian ad litem had been doing. And I think that time they didn't call the guardian ad litem first to screen it out. And so my little girl, both my oldest and my middle child, my little girl disclosed sexual abuse in the forensic interview. And it was something that I knew physical abuse, but sexual abuse is something you're never ready to hear. And I remember the workers telling me, and I was just asking them, like, how do you know? Why are you saying this? How do you know? And they told me what the disclosures were. And they didn't do an exam, even though they told me that they were going to. And they didn't do an exam. And they told me that it was the last time my children would have to be interviewed, which typically it's, that you don't want to re-traumatize children, and they're going to use the forensic interview. And the guardian ad litem came in and advocated for the father. But what also happened was, it was a very young Child Protective Service worker, and she was partnered up with a supervisor, and the supervisor was her husband worked and was friends with my ex. And at no point did she report that to anybody. She should have recused herself, disqualified herself. She should have stepped away. There's a conflict of interest. Given the nature of the allegations and the disclosures, she really should have stepped away, no matter what, right? Nobody wants to ever believe that their pastor from the church, molested children. Nobody wants to believe that the teacher did it. Nobody wants to believe that the teacher helped her husband take photos of a child, right? People don't want to really believe that, but it's easier to believe it when it's a stranger than when it's someone in your own family. Nobody wants to believe that. And so with her having some closeness to my husband, she really should have stepped away from the case, and she didn't. And they closed out the case. And that's what caused me to go into Child Protective Services. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that they hadn't interviewed collaterals, and collaterals are like references. They hadn't gone to my home. They hadn't gone to his home. They hadn't conducted a full investigation, and they were already saying that they were going to shut it down. And I mean, they turned my world upside down. That entire week I was vomiting. I was not, you're never ready to hear that. And that's when I went to go work for Child Protective Services. And just, I felt like it's what I had to do. And, I'm thankful for the eye-opening experience. I'm thankful that I get to treat people better than what I was treated like, than what my children were treated like. It's very traumatizing work. It's secondhand trauma. But whenever you also have trauma, and a lot of the times the reports come in with the same abuse that your children experienced or that you experienced, it can be re-traumatizing. And so it's very difficult to work. But it's work that needs to be done. And, I have coworkers that come to me that, just not during work hours, but that tell me, I agree with you. Thank you. Thank you for being that voice. I remember sitting through meeting and then just walking down the hall and walking outside, and it was like during lunch, and my coworker was like, I've been watching DHS on the news, and she's just kind of, mentioned it, and I didn't say anything, and I was like, is she hinting at me? And then I said, did you see me on the news? And she said, yes, I did. And I agree with you. And she told me that she's witnessed a lot of workers yell at parents, not treat them with dignity. And, while I'm trying to protect my children from a perpetrator, I do fully believe that those parents that have a path to recover their children should have one, right? The ones, depending on what the abuse is, how shocking and heinous it is. But it's one of those where children are so traumatized by the system. Children need their parents. Children need their parents. Children need their lifeline. Children need their families, their bond, where they came from. And it's difficult because a lot of the times you see children who are abused and you want to protect children, but you also have to help families. You have to help families and parents become good parents to those children, become safe parents to those children. And I think, sadly, that's what's lacking a lot. I think you oftentimes give parents a laundry list of things to do to become fit, but you don't give parents the support to be able to do those things. And I think that's the biggest disservice that we have for children. I've stayed in hospitals with children that are waiting inpatient. And I think one of the most difficult was whenever there was a child my age that was suicidal ideations. And it just broke my heart, to think, like, here's this child in this hospital bed, and they don't have any more bonds. They don't have any more connections, no more family, no more grandma, no more grandpa, no more aunt. And I think, children get lost in the system. Sadly, many children do that. If parents don't have that support, if parents don't have that initiative to make changes if they were unfit, then it cuts off the aunt who couldn't take placement for whatever reason. Maybe she already has 5 kids, but she didn't do anything wrong, right? And so that child should still keep that bond. And a lot of bonds are being severed with family members that are not unfit, right? But they just can't take placement for whatever reason, or for whatever reason the department, didn't truly initiate kinship placement, bypassed it, didn't follow the policy, whatever it is. But I just think we're doing such a disservice to children. We're not really thinking about children. And I think a lot of the problem trickles from the top to the bottom, where most administration is completely disconnected. They don't see children every day. They don't get to see children. They don't see children inpatient, waiting to go inpatient because they want to die. They don't see that every day. They don't see the mother that's struggling. They don't see the addict. They don't see the parent that was abused themselves and now has PTSD and now abusing their own children. They don't get to see that firsthand. And I think that's a lot of where the issues are. I think the department is ran a lot by attorneys instead of mental health professionals, instead of people that are driven to help reduce trauma, right? If we have a department that's driven by attorneys, that's typically how do we reduce liability, accountability, and lawsuits. And that's not a human services that will actually serve people. And so I think those are the conversations we're not really talking about. I really think that if the department really was on a mission to change things to be better, at any moment, I work for the state. They could be setting up training for whatever the complaints are, right? So there's DHS has been on the news. Child Protective Services in Oklahoma has been on the news repeatedly since really almost August, September of last year. And instead of addressing those grievances and being vulnerable about those grievances and saying, it's a very difficult job, we will try our best to look into this, to make it better. We're not a perfect system, but we will try every way possible. We don't have a department that is willing to do that. We don't have a department that's willing to be vulnerable. And it might be because they don't want to admit liability, but I think you have enough attorneys that you can figure out the language. But what people are wanting is some sort of dignity, some sort of voice, and to be heard. And whenever you have so many people, and yes, there are parents that are unfit. There are situations where we do need to remove children, but we also need to arm parents with the ability to give those children a fighting chance. And in a heartbeat, the state could call trainings and have every single CPS trainer, worker, say today at 2 p.m. everybody's logging on and we're going to discuss, how we treat families. We have had complaints that families are being yelled at, that they're being treated poorly, that they're being villainized, that they're being, because no matter what supposedly our core values of the department are, we're not supposed to treat people like that. We're supposed to be a support to families. We're supposed to be a support to children. And that's what the taxpayer is paying for. We are paying people to do their jobs and to make families better, not leave families broken. Whenever we're taking away children and we're severing all these bonds and their families didn't become better, that child didn't become better either. And now it's just this generational trauma. And we see where we remove children and then those children have children and then we remove their children. Whenever the department is the parent, you took that child away. It was your responsibility to make sure that child healed, was with a loving family, wasn't abused in the system. And then now as adults, they don't have the tools that you didn't give them as the department. You didn't give them as their now parent. And now you want to keep taking away their children and then their children and then their children. And, we have in Oklahoma, we have such a high substance abuse use. Domestic violence, we're among, worst in the country. Child abuse, we're like top 5 in the country. I mean, we are a traumatized state and we don't deal with the trauma. We just want to deal with the symptoms. And we don't have anybody in leadership that is actually having these conversations or vulnerably having these conversations with the public. Because at this point, I do think that they need to pull in parents that were affected by the system, pull in parents with grievances, pull in foster children that were abused in the system and now grown up. And you're going to have to really look at where did the department went wrong so that it doesn't do that again. And I understand there's times when you don't know that a foster parent is going to abuse, you don't know, but there's also many times where homes have been reported over and over again and nothing happens because we have a shortage of foster homes. But instead of showing the reality, Child Protective Services, DHS, has allowed, whenever they do their own marketing, they allow a camera to follow, right? I think one of the most effective to hopefully recruit foster parents that are hopefully loving foster parents is showing how heartbreaking it is whenever workers are on call and there's, a child that blew placement or children that came into custody. And then you have 3 siblings and they're just the sweetest siblings and they're well behaved. And the reality that as soon as you get that call, that those kids are going to be separated to every corner of the state. And those are the things we need to address, right? We keep saying there's a shortage of foster homes. There's a shortage. We need to recruit. But we're not showing the public the reality, right? Whenever you have workers, and especially new workers, but even supervisors that have been around for years, that make the call and they say, these kids have to stay together. We have to keep them together. They're great siblings. They're loving to each other. They don't have behaviors and they end up separated. I mean, it's so difficult. And the longest bond that any human has is their sibling. It's not your parents. It's not your spouse. It's your siblings. And so whenever you're tearing that apart, it's just heartbreaking. And I just think, I wish that we truly were human services, Oklahoma Human Services. I truly wish that we came from a place of vulnerability and that we really sat down, not to mask, not to buy Facebook social media campaigns so that we look a little bit better, but no, a true conversation of how do we become better. And we have to show where our weaknesses are, and we have to realize what our weaknesses are. But also, like, if we're putting people in leadership that have not faced adversity, whenever almost every single DHS client has, we really have to reflect on that. I saw an interview, and by watching the interview, I just thought this person is very out of touch with what our day-to-day clients are. They haven't experienced adversity. They haven't truly experienced what a minority has to go through, poverty, so many traumas. And so we really need to reformat how we are doing business for families, because if we were a business, we would be bankrupt, shut down. But there's also attorneys that are there for decades, and decades upon decades. And I think I'll just say it, very out of touch attorneys, where they're just being attorneys. There isn't humanity in the work, because they're so distanced from those children that are suffering, those adult protective services clients, and what's concerning, because I have attorneys that go to me, and they ask me for help, and so, and I started realizing, whenever I started becoming vocal, that, paralegals were sending people to me because the attorneys in their law firms couldn't handle it. Police officers sending people to me. The media sending people to me. It's just, we have to get the right people in the right place to help people. And I don't think there's efforts to do that. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's, just collect a paycheck for many of these workers and administrators. It seems like we switch administrators maybe every 2 to 3 years, right? The main head. But that's the puppet, per se, right? It's the attorneys and all the people that have been working there for decades without any accountability, liability. They get to keep their jobs no matter how huge of a lawsuit they faced. And if a huge lawsuit occurred on your watch, you need to go find another job and not continue the same. There was an attorney that spoke to me, and I won't mention her name or details, but she recorded one of the attorneys at DHS, and DHS would not follow the policy, and the attorney had to go get a court order from the judge to make DHS follow the policy. And then whenever they got the court order, that DHS attorney said that they were not going to follow the court order. So they're in contempt of court, but then you have attorneys who can't make waves because they're scared of retaliation. Like, that attorney just needed that case to conclude, just trying to, get that case to a good place before she feels she can release this recording or do anything about it. But in a more fair and just system, with one without retaliation, what that attorney could have and should have done is file a contempt of court on the Department of Human Services. And we've seen that happen. The state of Texas, I think they were doing sanctions for every single day. They were sanctioning the department. And then that judge ended up getting in trouble later on. And so it's just, we have a system that for whatever reason, the department is so powerful. And people fear it. Attorneys fear it. Judges fear it. Parents definitely fear it. Neighbors fear it. I mean, people are scared. People are scared to become targets. And the only way that this changes is if everyone rises up and uses their voice and worries less about are they going to become targets and focuses more on this has to change, because it's not going to get better. Our silence
Yeah.
isn't going to make it better.
So in the state of Kentucky, when I was working for the department, I ended up being one of the people on what they called the SMART team. And I had to go down to Frankfurt and sit down with all of the heads of all of the different YDCs and the different jails, the youth development centers, and I can't remember what they call them. Anyway, it was the youth jails that they have in Kentucky, and we would sit there and we did discuss all of the different grievances and all of the issues that were coming up. And so I got to witness a lot of that stuff firsthand. At the time, we had a new administration that had just come in and they had set that up. And I was one of the people that got selected because I can't keep my mouth shut. And so I was there on the board and meeting with them once a month. And what I found through all of that is, yes, we talked about a lot of things. And yes, a lot of things disappeared. That's as far as they got. They got to that meeting and they felt like, yes, we're dealing with these issues because they came up and we've discussed them, and nothing ever changed other than the fact that 6 months later they closed down our program. And so I got to watch some things and argue with some administrators about practices that were being done that were just unbelievable to me. Like we had certain facilities where you know worse than the jail that I worked at later on, where kids were not allowed to speak to one another. They had to go from place to place in silence. They couldn't talk while they were eating meals and things. And I thought, how crazy is that? Like, there's nowhere else in the world, like in our society, where that happens. Why would you do that here? I understand the thought processes behind some of those things, and they're not wanting things to be spread and all of this stuff, but you cannot do things that way. So the things that they were setting up were just unbelievable to me, like how we expect these children to come through this process and find any kind of help at all, and not find that there's just more trauma being placed upon them all the time, because that is not normal. It's not normal to go through those things and have to deal with that. It was just unbelievable to me, and I spent a lot of time arguing and advocating for for children, and just being surprised that those things were happening in the state that I was in. And just down the road, these are some of the practices from the people who are supposed to be in touch with what's going on, and thinking that that is an okay way to deal with problems and to deal with other humans. And it's just I don't know if things are that way now. This is almost 20 years ago now, but it's just unbelievable, some of the things that are being done out there, and they are certainly not serving the children that we're supposed to be serving, and giving them help and equipping them for the future. And then we wonder why recidivism happens, and why these cycles continue to happen over and over and over again, because we're not giving people the tools that they need to actually break free from those cycles, and to move outside of that, and to get the help that they need. Often one of the things that I talk about is that we need people to get involved in a lot of this work so that they can develop new programs, they can develop new modalities to go out there and help the people that we serve. Because without that, nothing ever gets better. There needs to be that focus on actually giving people the help that they need and giving them the tools that they need to escape from this. Yeah, it's so unbelievable. And of course, just like you said, many of those people that were in those meetings were attorneys that were only concerned about, legal stuff and not having more lawsuits and more issues and the state having to come under more litigation because of the problems that they were creating themselves. And yeah, it was just wild to see, everything you're saying. And that, again, this is 20 years ago, but all of that stuff was still happening then. And, you wonder how much better that has gotten. I know that they have closed down several facilities in Kentucky. I know, uh, you know, and they're probably much better for that. But it's wild. There are so many things going on out there that people don't see, they don't understand, and it is the workers that are working there. It's heartbreaking for them. There is a lot of continued trauma that they face, and I think it's difficult to get the answers and to get the implementation that needs to happen out there when the system is just continually running the same way all the time. It's not interested in change. It's not interested in bettering the people around us. It's wild.
You know, workers, I've ran into good workers. And I don't think that there isn't a good worker that agrees with me to some degree. And it's interesting because whenever you're within the department and you're reading reports, that get handed down to you, there's so many times I've heard workers say, "Who wrote this? Like, what, I would have never removed this child," or "Why hasn't this child been removed?" And so there's actually a lot of, I want to say, open criticism within the department, but it stays within walls, right?
Yeah.
People are too scared to actually say, like, can somebody review this case? It's almost like what was done, and the show just kind of has to go on after that. And it shouldn't be. It should be, if a supervisor gets, an investigation, and there's always the, I'll say, excuse of, "I didn't do that investigation. I wasn't part of that. I don't know all the evidence in that. I don't know what that worker knew." But whenever you have workers that are now more seasoned, that can read a report and know that there's things lacking or policies weren't followed just by the report that you read, I think it's our responsibility and our supervisor's responsibility to flag that and say, "Hey, we removed these children, but and I understand that we substantiated, and I understand this, but we need to review this case maybe a little bit more closely because there's a lot of holes here that we need to make sure we make better," right? Just because the department made a decision years ago or months ago or weeks ago or days ago, it doesn't mean that it was the right decision. And so I don't think we have a system that is accountable consistently, right? And that is checks and balances consistently. And I know many good workers that have their hearts in the right place, that want to help families, that want to help children, that want to protect children. And what I hear from a lot of these workers is that they end up being told by higher up supervisors, that they're not going to advance. They're not going to go higher up because they're the squeaky wheels that want to advocate for families or that bring up whenever there's issues, and they're not the ones that are going to rise up. And I hate whenever I hear good workers say that, good supervisors say that, because in my mind, all I can think, but you're the one that needs to rise up. You're the one that needs to make it to the top. And a lot of these really great supervisors, a lot of them don't have the ambition, or maybe they do, but they don't have really the ambition to want to rise within the department, because they rather be at a position where they feel they can help families.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be that way, because you should feel that you can rise and still help families and not get lost in a bureaucracy, in the red tape. In you should be a voice from the bottom up and from the top down. And so I do notice that there's a lot of good supervisors that I've ran into, and they say that somebody else voiced to them that they would not get promoted. And not that they're even trying to promote, but they get told that because of the way they are, because they're fighting a system, right? While they're workers, and it shouldn't be that way. Those are the ones that should rise, not the, and I think sadly those are the workers that get burned out, that leave the department, that end up having health issues, because a lot of this weighs very heavy on really good workers, and so it's just we really have to analyze and listen to workers. And I don't think it's an environment where supervisors, where they can truly say what they feel, where they can truly say what they want changed, where they can, it's almost like see and don't tell situation, right? It's better see and don't tell. It wasn't your investigation. It's none of your business. It's not your unit. Stay in your lane, and just get your job done, right? But that doesn't get the job done for children. And so it's a very difficult environment, and it seems like a lot of the times the not appropriate people are the ones that rise up, because they're just pleasing the department, but they aren't truly servicing and doing what they're supposed to be doing as social workers, as child protective service workers. I had a 84-year-old attorney contact me, and she was one of the probably the first, but one of the first attorneys in the state of Oklahoma, in California. She represented a child that was in child protective services custody, and as an attorney, she turned around and sued the department for her client, which is so rare, right? Like, you have a usually state funded attorney comes in, represents children, and these attorneys, sadly, a lot of the times they have a high workload. They're really not advocating for those children, representing the position of those children. But this woman did a lawsuit on behalf of her child's client, and that was just kind of unheard of. And she's been suing the department for decades now, after she did that. And so she contacted me, and I hadn't really paid attention, because I'm a little bit separated from the court, what happens in courts, other than showing up to testify. I haven't really worked foster care where I'm carrying out a case and I show up and I say, this is what's been going on with the case, and advocating for reunification or not. I haven't been a part of that. But I've been around parents enough, but she told me that show cause hearings were not happening. So evidence hearings were not happening. So parents are having their rights terminated without having these show cause hearings and evidence hearings. And until she told me I didn't notice it. That a lot of these parents, they come in to the system and they don't know the court process, right? They don't know you're supposed to have a show cause hearing within X amount of time. You're supposed to see your children within X amount of time. You're supposed to see your children every single week for an X amount of time. Parents don't know that, right? There's a lot of parents who they just kick down the show cause down the line, and it ends up becoming like a stipulated thing, and they don't tell them you have the right to have a show cause. You have a right to fight your case and to show that there's not enough evidence that you're unfit, that you did something wrong. They're not being given any guideline. They're not being given a booklet. Nobody's telling them their rights. Nobody is there to let parents know, hey, here's a timeline. This is what your first court session. This is what your supervised visitation should be. You should be seeing your child. If you don't see your child, you need to make a complaint here. Parents aren't given any guidelines. And I think that's such a disservice to families, disservice to children. And, like visitations, there's parents that go a month, they remove the children, they go a month without seeing the children, longer, even whenever it's not the perpetrating parent, but the partner was the perpetrating parent. And yeah, maybe sometimes the partner shouldn't see the children, but the biological parent who didn't do the abuse, and it's just like, you're traumatizing children further, right? They were traumatized in their homes, and then you remove them and you traumatize them more. And it's just, I hate it, but just abandoned and lost in the system. And if you don't give care and emotional care to children every single day, they are emotionally lost and abandoned in the system. It doesn't matter what grade of job any worker wants to do, what any administrator, what any department. Any child that is emotionally not cared for every single day is a child that is failed and abandoned and lost in the system. And we don't see that. We oversee what children are feeling every day, their fear every day. Their children are supposed to be held. Children are supposed to be loved. Children are supposed to have questions answered. And whenever children are being abused in the system, and not just by foster parents, not just by detention facilities, not just by homes, shelters for children. Like, whenever we are not taking care of children emotionally, that's neglecting a child, and that's abuse, and that's what we do as a system. And I say we a lot, but it's we as in I'm part of this state, I'm part of this country, I'm part of fixing the problem. And I had the department many times speak to me, and hopefully they're done speaking to me, in the sense of like trying to find a way to fire me. And, but it's just like, don't see me as a threat, like see me as a solution. Ask me, what did we do wrong? I'm sorry that something did go wrong. I'm sorry, they don't have to admit liability, but like, if you think I'm such a threat, if you see me on the news, if you see me doing Capitol rallies, if you see me supporting grand jury petitions to have the department investigated, or attorneys, judges, so on investigated, ask me, bring me to the table and ask me, what's missing, what could improve, what are we doing, I feel like that's leadership, not avoiding the topic and then continuing to reoffend and do the same over and over again for families. There's so many families hurting. And even if parents are unfit, they're hurting. They went through trauma. They're not addicts and users for no reason. They went through something, and we're not being a support to families. And, I kind of wish that the system was set up in a way that you had your child protective service worker go out, and it was kind of like a buddy system, but not really. You had a child protective service worker go out, and then you had a family advocate go out, both at the same time. The child protective service person is there to investigate, assure the safety of the child, and then the family advocate is there to de-escalate, to let the family know, I'm your advocate. We're going to be working through this. What needs to be done? Let's sit down. I'm not child protective services. I'm your advocate. I want to know who your mom is, your father is, aunts, uncles, whoever. Let's keep this child out of the system. Let's keep this child with family. That if you had an advocate that could be there to advocate, and families could feel a little bit more like, okay, here's this person that's going to hear me, here's this other, because typically, if you're removing children, parents kind of see you as an enemy, don't want to give you that information. But if parents know and families know that there's two separate entities that are going to share information, that are going to check and balance each other, that we would have more kinship placement, because families would say, yeah, I want my child to go to my sister, even though I haven't spoken to her because I have burned bridges from, drug use from all these years. Is just someone to explain to them what the system is. And then also someone to sign up families for resources. Okay, I'm going to sign you up for this, and I'm going to turn in a referral to a church, and we're going to see like what's lacking. You can't pay your rent. You can't do this. Let's get you back on your feet. Bad things happen so that good things can happen. You have someone there that can sign you up for whatever deficiencies the department thinks that you're lacking, because sometimes there's parents that are have already had their children removed, and these parents, there has to be a better system and a better way, but there's parents that are calling these parenting classes, and the parenting classes, we don't have the referral from the department, so we can't start you if we don't have the referral. And that's a failure of the department. Like, if you are going to take a child away and you're saying that a parent is unfit and a parent must do this, then you must do it too. You must give the parents a referral immediately, not a month in, not 2 months in, not 3 months in. And it's really scary, because we have laws that are changing every single year. And it's really scary, the amount of laws that pass and that the public doesn't know about. But more and more, like, parents are losing their rights, right? Like, adoptions can, at least in Oklahoma, can happen at a shorter time frame and so on. And it's like, if you are not going to submit the referral on day one, first week, and you have taken 2-3 months to do a referral, then parents, like, that's time they lost trying to recover their children. That's time that their children can be adopted. Like, you're failing the child, you're failing the family, you're failing the timeline. And so it breaks my heart when I see these laws, and I understand it to a degree, right? We want permanency for children. We want children to be in stable homes, but a lot of these adoption laws get shortened and shortened timeline. That's hurting families, that's hurting parents, that's hurting children, whenever you have departments that can't do their job, and don't do their job to do referrals, to help parents get started. And if we were truly a service department, then we would be taking care of families. And now I understand some parents are not going to do what they need to do, and that's just going to happen. But also, something that I notice is that sometimes workers don't have it right. The department doesn't have it right. Sometimes parents get accused of allegations. And there is unfitness. There is some unfitness there, right? But sometimes parents get accused of allegations that they don't have an unfitness to. It's almost like they just rack up allegations, and they may be unfit in one area, but they're not unfit in the other. And what I see is that really discourages the parent. And instead of the parent focusing on, okay, well, I do really have this problem and this and this and this, the parent does nothing because they're fighting for the injustice of being accused of doing meth whenever they're an alcoholic. And things like that matter to parents, and it should matter to everyone, right? You don't ever want to be accused of something you didn't do. And then how do you recover your child whenever you're an alcoholic but not a meth addict? But on the documentation it says you're a meth addict too, even though there's no evidence to prove that. Then how do you become fit whenever your recovery needs to be geared towards an alcohol abuse issue? And if you don't admit you're a meth addict whenever you're an alcoholic but not a meth addict. So it's things like these that I have seen with parents. And I have parents that come to me, not from work, but that just contact me outside of work. People that I've never worked with, I never touched their case. There isn't a conflict of interest. And so it's just, we really have to listen to our families. And I really do think that if you have a good rapport, you can really get from families what they're needing. And I think families can be honest if they feel like there's someone that is there to work with them, so that they can say, hey, I know I have these court orders, but I don't really have a problem with this, but I do with this. And I just don't think that families ever have like maybe a mediation opportunity where the department and the families can truly come together and try to make it better for children and for the families, where they can say, hey, I don't feel heard in this regard. It can become hostile. And I don't think that there really is a forum for parents and the department to come together and truly talk things out without it escalating. And there's supposed to be like, sometimes we have like a moderator, and the moderators tend to be very good in meetings. They tend to be the ones that de-escalate. There's a couple that aren't good de-escalators and I think don't make it very well, but for the most part we have good moderators. But you could have a good moderator, but if you don't have workers willing to listen to the families, or the families willing to listen to the workers, you don't really make headway. And I also wanted to say that there's a lot of people in my position that are employed by the state and are scared to speak up, right? They don't want to ruffle feathers, make waves. And all I can tell people is, it's your constitutional right to speak up. It's your, and nobody can violate that. Your employer can't, no one can. And I've spoken to plenty of attorneys to educate myself on my rights, what were my rights, what I could speak on, what I couldn't speak on. And you can never speak about a case. You can never speak about a case or case details. Even if you don't give the names, you can't, right? And I know that. And that's what workers need to know. But you can speak in general, policy violations, law violations, ICWA violations. What you witness, you can speak of in general policy or law violations. If people are violating the mission of the department, you can speak on that, because you're allowed to speak on public safety issues, and no one can stop you from that. And you're protected by law to be able to speak on public safety issues, and you cannot be terminated, you cannot be reprimanded, you cannot be retaliated against. And it's been very scary for me to speak up, but I've also spoken to so many attorneys, whistleblower attorneys, employment attorneys, every single possible a type of attorney I've spoken to. And I'm making sure that I do what I need to legally while still giving children a voice at all times, and people who are caught in the system a voice at all times. I've had people, because you're always going to run into it, but I've had people who question, like, do I have a conflict of interest, and why is she so special? Why does she get to speak up? Why is she not being fired? She's getting, special treatment. It's like, I am not getting any special treatment. I've had many meetings where I feared being fired, where I had to ask for my union rep and my attorney to be present, and where I was denied both, and if you're denied it, then it's the understanding that you're not going to be fired. But it's still scary to walk into any meeting where they're trying to find any little thing to fire you. And I know because of the questions that I'm asked. And so, it's like, I'm not being given any special treatment. I'm not cuddled by my employer. It's been very difficult. I have been harassed by my employer. I have been traumatized by my employer. But I know what my rights are. And I think at this point, they know what my rights are, and they can't stop me from utilizing my rights. And I just kind of wish that more state workers would rise up and do the same, because it would create an environment where you can speak up, and it opens up conversation. Now, there's a different dynamic for me in that this affects me personally. This affects my children. And anytime I get online, to speak on platforms like this or on the news, it's my children's case that I bring forward. And so, can you be a worker and have never experienced it personally and go to the news? I would say you still can, as long as you're not talking about certain cases and only about violations. But the department, doesn't want you to do that. They don't want you to speak to the press. They don't want you to, but it's when it's regarding specific cases. Like if it's a high profile case, the media may want to approach someone. Like, you can't give comment. You can't violate the law. You are bound by law to not speak of a case. And so it just kind of depends, but I don't think they can stop advocacy. I don't think they can stop a worker that wants to advocate for law changes, for so on. At least what I've been told by attorneys is that they can't do that. But there's a fine line, and I think what protects me is I know my rights, and I'm here speaking out as a mother. And if I wasn't a mother experiencing this, I wouldn't have experienced the rest, whether it be within the child protective service system or within the family court system, the probate system, guardianships. And, I haven't worked adult protective services. And, I've had attorneys who come to me for help, and I haven't worked that field, but one of the things that I'm concerned about with what I've seen with attorneys that come to me is that we think that it is difficult to recover children after the department has taken custody. I really fear that it might be even more difficult to recover adults who have been taken by the department. So if you are a parent with a child with a learning disability, I really fear that you can recover your child as a child much faster and better, and you have resources, than if that child becomes 18 years old and has a disability. My fear, from what I've heard from cases that are not work cases, but they're cases that come to me outside of work, I really fear that once you have adults with disabilities, the parents don't have the same due process as they do whenever you have minors, and that families don't. And I really do fear that whenever they remove an adult with a disability, they're not doing kinship finding. Because just because the mother was willing to take on her own child doesn't mean maybe aunt isn't willing to, or the cousin isn't willing to. And so those are my fears that I hope will be dove into and discovered. And so but it's going to take every one of us. And I think just as it's very difficult for parents to speak up on what's happened to them, and a lot of the times I've seen where cases outside of work come to me, the workers tell them you can't audio record, and we're a one party state. And so you don't have to tell anybody that you're recording. And if someone comes to your home, you can record all you want. That's the law. That's your right. I've heard recordings or messages from workers telling parents, you can't record me. Oh yeah, they can. They can absolutely record you. And so, but a lot of people with small children, and just with children in general, they're scared to come forward. And who's, I think, even more scared to come forward are adult protective services clients. And it's just a very small number whenever we know that's even a less perfect system than child protective services. And so I just kind of want to give a voice to adult protective services and those clients and those families that are hurt by adult protective services, because we have very few that speak up, and they're very silent, have very little resources to fight a system. And so I kind of want to make space for those people who have an adult in their lives that they've lost to the department. And I just don't know that there's a way for them to become fit and proper to recover their adult loved one, or just even the family in general. So there's a lot of issues that need to come out and that need to be addressed. Years, the department really has an issue with conflict of interest. And whenever my kiddos disclosed abuse, and my little girl disclosed, and I was telling you about that supervisor, years later, my oldest comes to supervised visits because I'm on supervised visits. For the department, I supervise visits with children and their parents, and I'm able to walk into any jail and not be patted down, and I can bring in my personal phone and a pen on my person, and nobody checks me, because that's the trust that the state has in me. But in a private guardianship court, I've lost my children and I have to be supervised with my children. But my child came to a visit saying how he was going to take cello lessons. And these cello lessons were at that supervisor's home. So we haven't even concluded our case. We've never even done mediation in family court. For all intents and purposes, it's a brand new case in which she's a witness, will be a witness. I hope to have her on the stand one day. I hope to depose her one day. And not only is her husband friends with my husband, but she was having my child go into her home to do cello lessons. And I sent a blast email. I just decided, you know what? I don't know if the department's going to do anything about it. I'm not going to alert the family court attorneys, the guardianship attorneys. I'm going to find out if they address it in any way. So I sent a blast email to higher ups at the department, to the news, and to legislators with this discovery that my child is now doing cello lessons in her private home whenever she undid a sexual abuse in an investigation prior. And she locked up her Facebook pretty quick. Now you can only see just her profile picture and so on. And those lessons stopped. And I only know that because my child came and said that the lessons had stopped. I didn't discuss this with my child. He was just telling me that he had the cello lessons, and then later that he couldn't have the cello lessons anymore. And so, but stuff like this is happening, and sometimes if someone's related to someone within DHS and their brother or somebody has allegations against them, for whatever reason, it seems like they're a little bit more protected. And so, it's like whenever you have you're related to someone in law enforcement or an attorney or a judge or the city, manager or whatever, you just have a little bit more protection, and it really shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs to be a level playing field for people to be able to get the support that they need. So let people know. I know I've already mentioned the website, but let people know where they can find out more about your story and the things that you have going on and get updates.
So it's Rosario. No, I'm sorry. It's Justice for Rosario, and that's Justice, and then the number 4, and then Rosario, ROSARIO.com. And there, it's probably the most updated. Like you mentioned, it does have a timeline. I think it has where you can find like social media. There's also a Facebook page that supporters started that is Justice for Rosario. You can find me on my personal Facebook, just Rosario Chico. I have a lot of parents that reach out. It's very difficult, to deal with the system itself, to work for the system, and to be fighting to still recover my kids. I have a brief in chief due July 10th with the Oklahoma Supreme Court. Hopefully I can recover my children and fight some of the court orders that were essentially ex parte orders that were not discussed in any court hearing, were not anything, and then they just put court orders that opposing counsel wants, but that are unconstitutional and don't make sense and shouldn't have ever been given out. And so what I do want to tell parents is, because I do have parents that reach out, is that it is painful. It is extremely painful. I mean, I am on year, almost 4 of this guardianship. And it is extremely painful. And I've had to pick myself up, but it has not been easy, right? At all in any way. And I know that that's what parents deal with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and health issues. It just piles up. And all of those things, I've dealt with, now dealing with health issues. And so I'm at the point where I have to give my children a mother to return to. It's no longer just fighting to recover my kids, fighting to protect my kids. Whenever I received bad news health-wise, I had a family therapy with my children. And my oldest was telling the family therapist that as soon as he could return to me, he would return to me, whenever that would be. And I had just received the diagnosis, and I keep some of it private because I haven't even told, my family to not worry them about parts of the diagnosis. But it hit me. Like, it hit me that we're not just parents until the age of 18, we're parents for a lifetime. And so I don't know what's going to happen. I will fight every day the best I can. Some days are harder than others, but we really have to look at the long picture and the short term, right? But the reality is I have to give my children a mother to come back to, whenever that is. If that's at age 18, when they age out, whenever that is, I have to give my children a mother to come back to. And so, what I can just tell parents is, even though it's so difficult, I'm a person who struggles with self-care, right? I care about everyone else before I care about myself. You have to do it. You have to take care of yourself, because you cannot be under the level of stress and pain and hurt for so long and not have it tear you down mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And so you have to do it. And you have to be kind to yourself. You have to go outside and be out in the sun. You have to find a group, find parents. You have to, even when you don't want to, go to lunch with your friends, be with family, even when it hurts at first, being around children, because you don't have your children, and people always want to ask questions. I'm to the point where everybody already kind of knows, so I don't have to talk about it, and they know my story and they support me. But it was very difficult, the first holidays without your kids, gatherings. Become an advocate, get involved, whether it's like NAACP, whatever, volunteer, like become a voice. And you don't have to carry the weight. I mean, you don't have to carry the weight. We can't carry the weight, right? What our hope is, whenever we step into becoming a voice, is that parents will become a voice with us, right? I can't carry your load. My load is so heavy, and I've tried to carry many parents' load, and it takes a huge toll. And I've helped many parents recover their kids, get rid of court orders, unlawful court orders. I've been able to do more for other parents than I've been able to accomplish in my case. But with that said, you have to take care of yourself, because it will take a very heavy load. And you have to eat well, you have to sleep, you have to go to the gym. And these are all things that you don't want to do for yourself. I didn't want to do it, right? Your children are taken away, your life is taken away, every hope is taken away. I'm more at the point where I'm forced to, because otherwise my children won't have a mother to come back to. And so, um, again, it's hard to do things for yourself, but you have to. And slowly, you start to heal, but you're doing it for your children, because if your children can see you overcome, if your children can see you with this immense pain, because they feel the pain, and they see you still out there doing things for yourself, bettering yourself, trying to be healthier, trying to sleep better, eat better, not for vanity issues, but to take care of your person, then that's what you're teaching your child. And I only have 4 hours that are very limited with my children every week, but those 4 hours are sacred. And they thought that they were going to break the bond. They thought that my kids were going to be brainwashed somehow, and that they were going to forget their abuse. And my kids, unfortunately, haven't forgotten the abuse that occurred to them. And my children, thankfully, have not forgotten the bond. Like, once you have the bond, you have that bond. And many supervised visits, you can go into them with a lot of pain and heavy, and smiling on the outside and playing with your kids, but still pain and heavy. Um, or you can get to a point where you can genuinely enjoy your children for those 4 hours, and that's where I'm at. And it's had to become a forced effort, because I won't last. If I don't take care of myself, I won't last. And that's what I want to tell every parent, grandma, people out there who are fighting to be reunited. You have to put the oxygen mask first in order to save your kiddos.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I have, that has been a realization that I've had to come to this last like 4 months, that uh, you know, you definitely have to take care of yourself before you can help anybody else. Like, you have to be around to be able to do those things. So yes, I am right there with you on that same path, trying to figure that out and to make sure that I'm, doing that and taking that self care. So thank you so much for being on, and for being willing to do all that you're doing, uh, for the entire situation that you are dealing with. And, you know, yeah, I'm glad that you were able to do this, and we can get this out there even more, and, get people to start realizing the things that need to change, and the movement that needs to happen. So hold on just a second. I'm going to do a quick little closing, and then I'll be right back with you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode of True Crime Myths, Legends, and More. Uh, Make sure you check it out. I will leave it in the description as well. Go and check out Justice for Rosario with a number 4, and go and check that out, and really get all the details of that, and find out where you can help out in all of that, whether it is going out and advocating, or speaking out about the things that you were seeing. And yeah, just go out there and do all that you can to help out, because there is definite change that needs to happen within all of that. And just do what you can. And we thank you for stopping in and checking it out, and we will talk to you soon.